Good morning and welcome to our July Budget Committee meeting. It's summertime, so some of us are wearing lighter and brighter colors. Anyway, we're going to begin our session now. We've had some changes in our agenda. The executive session is not needed because the possible vote on a matter discussed in executive session, the matter was withdrawn. So we're going to go straight to ED1 for the Board of Education transfers. And so we welcome Sean O'Keefe. And then we'll do ED2 thereafter. And very sadly, this is our last public meeting with Sean, as Sean is departing our town for another. So welcome, Sean.
Thank you. Bittersweet. Okay, so there's three chart, well, there's ED1 and ED2, and ED1 is the operating fund. In the operating fund, overall, we have a surplus of about $520,000. One of the major object code services was the only one that had a negative balance, so of $1,231,687. So the year-end transfers includes transfers from salaries in the 100, 300 supplies and materials, 400 maintenance, and 700 non-sped settlements, adding up to that $1,231,000. As far as, do you want me to stop there before I go on to food services?
Yeah, why don't we stop there and then see if anyone has any questions
Okay.
on ED1, and then we can go to ED2.
Sure.
So do we have any questions, Leslie?
No, I just wanted to make a few comments here because to confirm, just so everyone on this board, and I think this committee knows, that it's this committee that has the authority to approve the transfers. It doesn't go to the full BET. And that the Board of Education has certainly a great deal of ability and authority in doing their transfers. But when we look at, this is always a learning piece of information for our board as we look at this year's budget and next year's budget. And clearly, when we look at fiscal 23's budget, the Board of Ed's going to have the same problem. You're already probably 1.1 million under budget in special education. You told us that when you came with your budget, you thought it was even a little bit lower. You thought it would be 8.3, I think.
We knew we were going to start the year with a similar exposure in special ed tuition and settlements, as well as we did take a little bit of risk on the closing the transportation gap.
Yeah.
And then on top, then there was the 290,000 at that final adjustment, so.
Yeah, so I think our board has to recognize that the Board of Ed's going to be under the gun on their budget this
It will
year.
be.
and
It'll be a
those
tough year.
Two particular budget items. But looking at this year, the observation you make is a lot of the funding came from 400 facilities maintenance lines is where you sourced 660,000 of the transfer to cover the special ed shortfall. And some of that may be due to the Central Middle School additional appropriation that was made in the middle of the year, that maybe you're not using the full 1.6 million.
So that appropriation was made into the operating fund as opposed to capital. I guess the BET decided that. And yes, we are underrunning in that overall. And so that was part of the equation.
And I think as we look at, kind of keep following your budget through the year and look at the next year's budget, we'll want to look at that maintenance budget to understand, what you're asking for, what you spend it on, and why there's variability there. But that was a little bit of a surprise, the source. Typically, I would have expected from the 100s just because there's so many moving parts with personnel. But it was a large amount that came from maintenance. I think that was the key observation that I had from this number.
Okay. Laura, do you have any questions?
I want to thank you, Sean, for all your efforts. Well, you've been with the district. We'll miss you and wish you luck in your
Been my pleasure.
in your
Truly
new
has.
endeavor. I just want to amplify Leslie's concern. I mean, you flagged this issue very early on for the Board of Ed, so it's no surprise, the overages and out-of-district tuition and settlements. And I guess, as a board, we want to be thoughtful. I mean, you were able to manage expenses so you can cover it within the existing budget after revisions, but it's probably not the right way going forward. We need to recognize that these sped costs are real. They fluctuate, and we should budget for them appropriately. So I hope, I know the question was asked last night at the Board of Ed meeting, what didn't we do, or what are we not doing, or is there a risk of not doing, you don't have the answer
There certainly
yet?
is a risk, as we just discussed. Stacy is well aware of it, and she's working on, changes to the program that could potentially be, create some savings.
Right, and I
So-
appreciate that. I know that, but those will bear fruit, probably not in fiscal '23, right? They'll probably take some time.
Possibly not,
But
because
I
some
know
of those programs take an
Everyone's very
investment.
honed in on this issue, and I just, again, I wanted to amplify Leslie's concern. This is not a surprise. This is a routine item. I have no problem with it, but it's an ongoing issue. Thank you.
Thank you.
Nisha, you have any? So, Sean, I have another question about the maintenance. Is there any overages here also, because this is where the funds bulk came from, as you pointed out, from the accounts that we moved from capital into operating, that said that that's annual operating? So, I mean, to be
That was
honest.
the cyber? Is that what you're talking about?
No, I'm just talking about when we moved some capital items last year, and we will for this fiscal year '23, from capital back into operating, because I think Roland and Pete recommended that they were really operating accounts. So we're going to be tracking those accounts that were transferred. I mean, we are already for the 1 year. Now we'll be tracking it for multiple years. But was any of that availability attributable also to the any account that was moved from?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay.
Not that I'm aware of. I mean, I could certainly look into that.
I mean, just as a, if you don't mind looking into it.
Okay.
I mean, it's not going to make any difference to today's
Right.
approval.
Yep.
But, if you'd look into that, that would be great.
Okay.
And then I think last night, Tony did indicate to the Board of Education, Dr. Jones, that there would probably be savings with the new programs that are being implemented. But, again, there's always a implementation period too.
There's the upfront investment at times, and there's also just, you don't know what else could happen.
Right.
That brings us the other way.
Right,
I
right.
mean, and it's not unique to Greenwich, it's everywhere.
So should we just move to, oh, I'm sorry. was
Well,
gonna
I
go
just wanted to
ED2.
add to your comment, because I looked at that, and it's mostly the 300 accounts that those items were moved from capital to operating. So rather than asking Sean to come back to us on a follow-up item, I just wanted to say that that was mostly in the 300, so I don't think it has any impact on this transfer.
Thank you, Laura. Okay, so I guess we'll move now to ED2.
Okay,
Please.
ED2,
I'm sorry, no,
Yeah,
I just said we'd do them both together. I mean, there's no ED2, right?
Right,
Oh,
so
you-
can I make a motion to approve ED1?
Of course. If we'd rather do it that way. So motion by Leslie, is there a second?
I can second.
So seconded by Nisha. Those in favor? So that passes 400 unanimously. Okay, 82, I'm sorry? Oh, no, this is, so ED2, please?
so ED2, we had, as far as expense goes, pretty decent year in expense overall. And by the way, revenue was over budget, or will be over budget once we get the state reimbursements. So we did very well with reimbursements that more than offset the loss in the sales revenue. So good story there. And we underran expense overall and by major object code, so there's no adjustment needed.
Great, super. So I will just thank you and wish you all the best.
Thank you, thank you. I really
gonna miss
appreciate
you.
it, guys.
Great working with you, thank you,
Yeah,
Sean.
we're going to miss you, truly.
I will miss you, truly.
Okay, so our next, I'm sorry? So next up, we have FD1, the fire department, for $186,000 in transfers, and we welcome our Deputy Chief Charlie Ludowicki.
Lubawicki, yes. Good morning, committee members. So today, I'm here for interdepartment transfers. As we talked about earlier at our meetings, that we perceived that there was going to be a shortage due to overtime in the injury account. With the help of Mr. Geiger, we put together this list of transfers to cover the shortages that we have from within.
Okay. Do we have any questions?
I had no questions.
Any questions?
Happy to make a motion.
I'm sorry?
I'm happy to make the motion.
No, I have one question, though. One of the transfers, and I don't know whether, since you've mentioned Mr. Geiger, but I think it really is you. I noticed that one of these transfers is from water service, and this is the first year in about 3 or 4 years that we haven't actually had to cover water service. So can you just explain why there's still an availability of $70,000 in water service, if you know?
Yes, so when we get the bill for water service, it has the rate based off of the last year's water service rate, and it gives a potential raise based on what is voted on, I believe, by the board in Pura, and it did not get moved to that level before the end of the fiscal year, which kept it lower than we had perceived.
Great, thank you very much. Okay, I'm sorry, was there a motion?
I have a question.
Oh, yes.
Yep,
Alicia?
thank you. I just wanted some more color on so it says, transfer to cover higher overtime and injury pay expenses. Can you give a little bit more color on what are injury pay expenses in terms of why is that being booked? Are you booking it into overtime, or how does that work?
Yeah, so if someone goes out on FMLA for injury, the town of Greenwich has that person go on to FMLA. They get their regular salary, but it comes out of this different line item, which obviously would draw red for us.
Yeah.
And that person is then replaced at an overtime cost of 1.5 times, which is why we have that difference there.
And the bulk of the overtime, or all of the overtime, is attributed to the covering of individuals that took time out for injury?
Not all of it. We had some retirements. We had 2 long-term injuries, actually 3. One that led to a retirement on July 1st. We also have one person on long-term military leave serving overseas, and they're slated to come back, I believe, November or December. So that kind of adds to that as well.
Okay, and then I just want to make sure I understand. So this is overtime above and beyond what was originally allocated or budgeted for the year?
Yes.
Right, and so this is
Yes,
things you
we
either
can't
didn't
plan on
expect?
people.
Yeah,
Yeah, we can't
right.
plan on people being on long-term
Exactly,
injury,
right.
unfortunately.
Okay, thank you.
I do have one question, and maybe I should direct this to Mr. Geiger. In looking at this sheet, there's really only 70,000 that's moving between major object codes. Should the authorization really be just for 70,000, since the chief has authority for the rest of the transfers?
It was so many, we weren't sure where the money would eventually come from at the end of the year, so we just put everything on this procedures.
Okay. So does that mean that it's possible that some of the money may even come from different accounts than the FRUMs listed on this sheet?
No, the funds are, that's where it's coming from.
And it's all going into the 100s. So at this point, which, it's a week later since you put the sheet together, it's probably just 70,000 major object code transfer that's requested or needed. By approving more, it doesn't help you, give you more authority, because it's just 100 to 100, isn't that?
It doesn't change the bottom line in terms of what's left at the end of
I just want to wonder whether for the full BET, whether the sheet should come in only with the 70,000 transfer from the 200s to the 100s.
Roland, I'm going to turn to Roland, because I'm not going to make that decision, or I think it should be Roland, and if he's presented as this way, Roland, do you want to change it, or should we just leave it as an abundance of caution? You don't totally close the books until like the 20th of July, so, if you want to keep it this way, I have no problem leaving it that way unless,
Path of least resistance is to leave it this way, but it doesn't give them any extra authority. But just to be clear, it's really only a 70,000 authorization that you need.
Roland, have we decided leave it this way or make a change? Leave it this way?
Okay.
Leave it this way. We're leaving it this way, Charlie. Okay, so do we have a motion, then, to approve this? No.
I'll make the motion to approve a transfer of 186,000.
And I'll second.
Okay, Leslie Moriarty made the motion, seconded by Nisha Arora. And I assume this is routine? And this is routine, which means you don't have to come, Charlie, next
Appreciate
Monday.
that.
Those in favor? Okay, so that's 400, and it's routine.
Thank you
So-
very much.
Thank you very much. Happy summer. Okay, so now we're on Nathaniel Witherell in W1 for $30,000 transfer for medical liability costs. Mr. Menarski, were you going to update us on this?
Yes, I'm going to do this transfer because it's more applicable through the risk manager as opposed to Nathaniel Witherell. The transfer request is $30,000 from healthcare cost. The healthcare is, with an original budget of $3.67 million, is looking at a $972,000 surplus, so there's surplus funds in the healthcare. The general liability in the insurance for medical professional liability policies came in over budget. Because their insurance lines are in the 5.6 object codes, 56280, they are short. Last year, the policies came in at $212,000, which is presented a shortfall against $182,244. So that's the request. And just as an aside, there will be a shortfall in fiscal '23. The bid, they came in about $20,532 over budget for the current year. There's no need to do a transfer at this point, but you will be doing one between now and next July. So the request is to cover the shortfall in the medical professional liability and excess liability attached to that policy for last year.
For fiscal year
22.
22.
Yeah.
Correct.
That actually cued a comment I had, and I don't know whether it's, again, worth changing, but the cover sheets for both this, the fire transfer, and the Board of Ed transfer doesn't refer to fiscal '22. Board of Ed has the backup sheet to show that it's fiscal '22, but the cover sheets here don't indicate which fiscal year it's applying to. Is that just for record keeping, something that we should?
I think that that's a good idea, because we start obviously numbering them for this fiscal year. So maybe, as an example, under the justification, requested cost of medical insurance exceeded, and just add fiscal year '22 budget? Is that what you're saying, Leslie?
Yeah, and the same comment's really for fire as well. The Board of Ed one, since they have attached numbers,
So Roland, can you make those two changes to those sheets and do the same thing, transfer to cover higher fiscal year '22, higher overtime and injury pay expenses? And, so make that change in the justification. Is that a good place, Leslie?
yeah.
Justification, because I also think it's a very gray area, and that would help with the clarification. So you'll make that change, Roland, in those two sheets. Okay, do we have a motion then? Is it a motion to approve?
I'll make the motion to approve transfer of $30,000 in Nathaniel Witherell.
I'll second.
And motion again made by Leslie Moriarty, second by Nisha Arora. Those in favor?
Aye.
So, and that's a routine item. Is that correct, Leslie?
Yeah, sorry, routine.
Routine item 400. But we'll expect you back at the next meeting, Pete. Okay, so our final application today, as such, is from our town clerk's office. So we welcome for the first time our town clerk, Jackie Budkins. And good morning, Jackie, and she's going to request a $40,000 department expenses transfer, and is going to explain these to us. And I know she has worked with Mr. Geiger. So welcome, Jackie. Is your speaker on?
No, the speaker wasn't on, okay. Yes, Roland has been quite helpful to me, and I bombard them with a lot of questions, just information is helpful. So we've combined everything into the total of 40,000. Our first transfer would be to cover the regular salary expenses. We had a part-time person who was changed into a full-time person mid-year. So there was a slight change there. There was a lot of additional overtime due to COVID and absentee ballots for elections. As we know, that's grown over the last 2 or 3 years. The next for the 5,000 was, again, for overtime for RTM meetings. We exceeded our budget due to, we've brought additional members there. We are starting to train everyone. In the future, I think we'll have less people with our new system, which moves us to the next item. But we also had more work because of COVID. There's more time for certain people to be working on it. And then our last item, the 10,000, was to cover the cost of the new RTM voting system, which we purchased this year, which is going to be really great, hopefully moving forward in September. And that's a one-time purchase, which is nice, and our carrying costs will be very minimal for the first year. There's no cost, and then after that, it's very minimal.
Great. And the money is coming from? You had overages in certain accounts, so you had
Right, so
available money?
we've bought from document imaging, 25,000 up to the regular salaries line to cover that deficiency. Then for the overtime as well, we moved that from document imaging. We paused on going further with our document imaging. We paused on a project with co-files so that we had the funds to transfer over, based on Roland's request. And then the funds for the 10,000 to cover the cost actually came from printing and binding reports, which we had funds left over as our costs have gone down there, and moving it over to the supplies to purchase.
Great, thank you. So we have any questions? Oh, start with Leslie. Leslie?
I just had one question.
Sure.
On the new system that you have, you're charging it into the 100s, which make it seem like it's a personnel expense. What is it that you're buying for the RTM? And I guess it's more a question for the accounting, Mr. Geiger. What account should it be charged to?
It's going to 300s, right, Roland, it should be going to the 300s, to the department read.
That's a transposition. It should be-
Okay.
Okay.
So Roland, you're going to fix this, or Jackie's going to fix this?
Either one.
Okay. Good question, good catch.
It's funny, I was looking at that before I came up here.
Okay, yeah, it's just like
Yeah.
100s of people. And typo, September and footnote C, since you're making a change anyway.
Okay.
Roland, you saw that too? Did you hear that, Roland? No, thank you.
This should also refer to fiscal '22 somewhere in the explanations.
In the notes, sure, but we can add that.
Thank you.
Of course. It's a great learning experience.
Little details, it's happens all the time.
Right.
Nisha, do you have any questions?
Yes, I did.
You have your hand up?
Yeah, I did. Similar to Les, in the same vein, the question I had was, one, I didn't know about the RTM voting system. Could you just describe that a little bit?
Oh, sure.
And then the second part of the question was, I was thinking it was if it's a technology purchase or more of a software that's a one-time, and then you're going to have some recurring cost, does office supplies, is that the right categorization? Do you have a technology
We have a-
line in your, I don't have the buckets in front of me, but one thought and I think I've discussed this with you offline once, is, if there's more opportunities to automate within your office as you look forward, as you look to maybe, acquire other pieces of software that can help you in your business, maybe if there isn't a technology line item or bucket within your department, maybe that makes sense
Right.
for a categorization. So not quite where from a categorizing, but
Right.
I wouldn't see it as office supplies. I would see it as more of a.
Right, it's going to be more of a subscription,
Right.
so to speak. So our first purchase was the hardware, which it's an e-voting system, so it's electronic voting. When people are in person at the RTM, we will have actual clickers that they will vote on. But it also allows us the option for people to vote remotely, because going forward, we're going to be hybrid. So people remotely can vote, and the first year, it's free. For the first year, we have no cost for a subscription. Moving forward, we'll have a subscription cost. And there's a small fee for if you're for every clicker, over 100 clickers, you're charged like $1 a day. It's a minimal fee. I think in total, after this, in our current fiscal year, there'll be no charge on that. After that, moving forward, it's going to be about $2,400 a year.
And the 10,000 right now is the actual clickers or the
The clickers
actual-
were 91,
Right.
9150, 9188
Is
for
anybody-
the whole project. So it's clickers, it's a case, it's lanyards, it's training for everyone, for the office, the back end. There's no cost to the laptop. I acquired a laptop from our IT department, which will be specific to RTM meetings only for this purpose. The system runs on its own antenna, so to speak. So it's on its own kind of modem, so it's not connected when you're in-house. It's not connected to the internet. So IT has been like,
Now, as one more question, are there any other municipalities that have, like, are you,
not that I'm aware of,
Where-
not in Connecticut. No. This company that we're going with does the New Hampshire House, which is the largest body, and they also do Congress, United States. Theirs isn't remote, but, so they've been around for 50 years. They have a great reputation. It's been very well researched by the team that was put together with Alexis and Catherine. LaBalbo's been great, and Tom and our cybersecurity team. They are.
that's awesome.
They're
That's really
great.
great to hear.
Yeah,
that's really
no,
good
I'm
to-
excited. It's going to
Yeah.
be great. So,
Thank you.
yeah.
Questions? So is there a motion to approve this transfer?
I'll make
Fiscal
the
year
motion.
22?
Yeah, I'll make the motion to approve $40,000 transfer for the town clerk office.
And I'll second it.
And is this, so motion made by Leslie Moriarty and second by
I'd also say this is routine.
routine? Okay, so this is routine also. And once again, like the two previous ones, there'll be minor little fixes to the blue sheet, but you don't have to come to the meeting in Monday. So those in favor? No, we haven't taken a vote yet.
Aye.
So the motion passes 4-0-0 unanimously. Thank you, Jackie.
Thanks, Jackie.
Nice summer too, right? So our next up is our economic conditions report. So this is a year-end report, so this covers a lot of territory. So Roland, would you like to present this? I guess start with conveyance taxes, right?
Yeah, the conveyance tax is still very strong. We ended 4.6 over budget. Building permits, same thing, $2 million over budget, although it slowed down a little bit in June. See what happens in July and August. And interest, it's a little bit lower than it was the prior month, but that's because the cash balances were down quite a bit, and the CD program doesn't actually start until July. Total revenues are about $18 million over budget.
18 million over budget total. So I just want to, I will make a comment here. Looking at the conveyance fees, it looks like it's about the 7th highest month in this current, or in fiscal year '22. So we are beginning to, at least in that 1 month, a fallback. And then also, just a further comment on the building permits, again, that's the lowest month of the fiscal year '22, but it's also the lowest June in the last 6-year period. So we're beginning to see some changes in our revenue flow, but maybe, and we'll see what trends we begin to see in the fall in this new fiscal year '23. But obviously, overall, it's extremely strong, and we've been very, very fortunate.
So like I said, the revenue is about $18 million over budget at this point. When you couple that with, it looks like the $6 million over or under spending on that side. When you account for the $20 million of fund balance that we used, it looks like we will be increasing fund balance by about $4 million.
By about 4 million?
Can I ask a question on?
Of course.
On
I
that?
didn't look your way yet.
No,
course.
just on revenue, before I move over off of that, because you said revenue is 18 million higher than budget, and I know we have the detail on revenue here, but our report doesn't show versus budget, it just shows versus last year. Do you offhand, and if you don't know the answer, you can get back to us, these three items account for 6.6 million, 7 million of that 18. So that still leaves 11 million of revenues that are significantly higher. Offhand, do you know what are the key
Taxes.
line items? It's taxes. So that could just be a timing issue. Oh, no, it's, well, versus budget, is that a timing issue?
Taxes are 5.6 million higher, surplus. We had a couple areas in the tax area. For example, we had prepayments of over 53 million. The second highest was 30, last year was a little over 30 million. We had the car taxes generate a tremendous surplus because the used cars were, value was increased dramatically. We had no court steps. Each year, we true up the levy by $1.5 million. This is, I think, the third straight year where we've had either no court steps or very negligible. And as I said, we got a lot of pre-taxes in June, which helped with the surplus. A couple other areas, special education came at $1.3 million. We got, there was a bunch of us, maybe 4 or 5 of us, couldn't figure out, we thought we were being overpaid by the state. And we contacted the Board of Education. They had somebody new over there recalculating the special education reimbursements. We picked up about $550,000 more than it was projected by the Board of Ed back in February. Hurricane Isaias, we picked up over $500,000 we didn't expect. Any other surprises? The lot SIP was a couple $1 million over as opposed to the low SIP. But I think predominantly the three biggest were the conveyance tax, the property taxes, and the building permits, which came out to about 12 million collectively.
That's a good summary. Thank you so much, Pete.
Would you going to add anything?
I mean, some of them, I'm just trying to think going forward, if we look at, are we under budgeting in some of these areas? But some of these are, like the tax, there's been no settlements. We may have to give back some of this revenue if there are settlements next year that are retroactive. The tax repayments, the fact that we had a lot more prepayments in June should mean that there's fewer payments in July or lower payments in July. So I'm just trying to figure out what's money in the bank that stays there versus what will even out over time. So thank you.
And I think it's good to, think that way, Leslie. I think we have some things on expenses too. We can but I think that Pete's summary was very good. I don't know whether you're going to put something like that into your monthly report, but I thought what you just told us was excellent, and it should be conveyed broadly. Any other questions on the revenues? No. Okay, so, Roland, do you want to talk at all about expenses?
There looks like about $6 million under budget. So between that and $18 million of revenue, he said that we should be about $4 million over, or fund balance should be about $4 million higher.
Okay, thank you. So,
Can I just qualify that? We haven't done all the posting. We have the 60 days.
Right.
We don't have all of the June bills in because it's obviously very early in July. I don't expect it to substantively change, but there's 60 more days that have to occur. We believe we've gotten all the revenues. We don't know if we've gotten all of the expenses. We've encumbered over $1 million less than we did last year. So potentially, if they did not encumber correctly, they become accounts payable, and then they have to be taken into account. So we've got 60 days of revenues and expenses still to go.
so if you don't feel comfortable, putting together a paragraph like we just talked
No.
about, don't do that. I mean, I just thought that you did such a great summary that it would be great to share it more broadly,
No,
but whatever
I
you're
can,
comfortable.
I can do that very easily, but I'll qualify it,
Okay.
exactly the way I just did. So-
Super, super. Laura?
I appreciate that caveat. And I guess first question is, what is the deadline, if you will, that you've asked departments to encumber fiscal '22 expenses by?
It's over.
It's
It's
over.
over Saturday.
Okay.
They came in and they approved encumbrances, so it's over. However, as I just stated, let's say somebody encumbered $100, and then a bill comes in for $150, the 50 becomes accounts payable. So the encumbering part is done.
Gotcha. So if I'm looking at the substitute sheet, so we've underspent by 6.7 million, it looks like, and a lot of that is in employee benefits. Is there any color you can offer on that?
Yes, 2 million was healthcare. I can't remember exactly what it was. 1 million was insurance policies. As you know, each year, we rely on Gallagher in February, March to give us a number. Unfortunately, 2 years ago, they were short by $500,000. Then the next year, they created a surplus of $1 million. So the bulk of it is insurances for almost $1 million, 990 or 980,000. 2 million for healthcare. The workers' compensation, which I'll report Wednesday, is 422. So you probably between 3 and 4 million of it was just they were the highlights.
So I'm going to make sort of the same comment that Leslie made on revenues on these three items. I highlighted them on my sheet. And also, just for anyone who has the other package, the expense page has been updated to address the difference column. But, so, in all these cases, Pete, we really, I mean, obviously, we'll be looking at the increases in, the various and sundry insurance, workers' comp, health insurance, et cetera. But it appears with these kind of savings, we'll call it, budget versus, the actual, we should be looking at our base when we make our increases in February, right? We need to kind of look at what the base is, if the base may actually move it down and then do our increases. Is that correct?
Yeah, yes, as a follow-up to Ms. Moriarty's comment about there potentially is going to be a catch-up with the SIP court stipulations. You've got to be aware of that. You're not going to have $1 million surplus in the insurance policies. I should have one day this week for the BET offline, the results. We came in under budget, but it's not anywhere near the $1 million. The workers' compensation, we're at the mercy of catastrophic claims. And as I repeatedly stated, every year before the Budget Committee and the HR Committee, Human Resources Committee, is we keep taking 100,000, 150,000 from the workers' comp line. So again, a catastrophic claim can wipe that out. On the horizon, there's the ever looming healthcare potential that could, I mean, it went from, we were only 2%, I think, this year as far as actual to actual. And you put 10.5 in the budget, and we don't know what we're looking at for 23, 24. So yes, there's to your point, there's going to be different bases as far as budgeting for 23, 24.
Thank you, Pete. Okay, so this is great, Roland and Pete, between the two of you.
Can I just follow up?
Of course.
Are you going to go outside of economic? I was going to do some of the odd funds other than general.
Yeah, no, great, please.
Were you going to move on from the economic report?
Well, if we, I'm sorry, do you want to talk more in this area? And then the
Yes.
answer is yes,
Yes,
please, just
yeah.
continue.
I wasn't sure if you were finished, and I thought you might have been moving on. This is preliminary. The school fund had a phenomenal year. The revenues were extremely higher than the year before, and as of today, again, everything's not posted, they had over $1 million surplus. They had a negative fund balance of 834, which is completely wiped out. And again, we'll go to the budget for next year, which means that you're going to have budgetary savings in the transfer, you know,
Right.
the prior year losses and the subsidies for the school lunch. Nathaniel Witherall, we're still posting, so we can't forecast where we're going with that. The parking fund was not as bad as we anticipated. The preliminary deficit was only 51,000, which leaves the unrestricted still over $1 million plus. And then finally, the golf course, which people pay very little attention to unless it's the cell tower. They had a surplus of 549,000. Their fund balance is well over $2 million.
Thank you,
And they
Pete.
were, I just picked all good news stories.
Is it, well, I thought all news was good news these days. Anyway, thank you for this update. Any other questions about that? I mean, I kind of was looking at some of these things, but I think, you know, we can tell a little bit here. But I think what you've done is a really good clarification for us. So I appreciate that. Any other questions on this
Just
topic?
on the, only because the golf fund and the cell tower, they still are, you know, the revenues were lower than budget in their operating lines. So I don't know if that means that they had savings in their expense lines to offset that, but glad the service is offered to our residents, and, you know, we should have the facility. That's not why I'm questioning, but it's interesting that I know that last year was a great year for outdoor activities because of COVID, and that benefited from that.
Actually, when I looked at it, it didn't look like, I was trying to put the numbers together. I think we need to go back and look at that. But anyway, this is great, and thank you for that additional information, Pete. So, okay. So we'll move on to the next,
Well, can I ask the question? Is there
Of course.
any bad news we should know about? This is all good news, but.
Yes, there is.
oh,
The retirement fund did not have a good year. We have an assumption discount rate, return rate of 6%. We did not make that. The fund, I don't, when I get the flash report in the next week or so, I think we were positive, but we didn't make the 6%. We'll have a presentation from the actuary July 28th at the retirement board on how that impacts the actuarially determined employer contribution, ADEC. OPEB did not have a good year. You could see We'll have, the treasurer will give a report on Thursday. They lost millions, which will have an impact with the OPEB actuarially determined employer contribution. Couple that with healthcare inflation kicking in. I don't think, see, it was them two, parking fund, school lunch. I don't believe there's, Nathaniel, we're not sure, we don't know yet, right? We just posted revenues last night. I think that's the bad news is the trust funds. But then we're in it for the long haul with the trust funds. And I don't think it'll have much impact on the contribution for the 23-24 budget. In the retirement, in the OPEB, it probably will, but relative to the size, 4 million versus 28 million, it might only go up $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 as opposed to millions. I think the bond fund, we got $10 million relief for the GHS soil remediation. We were able to transfer ARP monies out of the $31,399,117. We got relief on the GHS soil remediation for last year. So that's $10 million of cash we got in that we didn't have to borrow. I think, now, other than that, again, wage inflation, healthcare inflation, that's the only bad news I could think of.
Thank you. I just wanted to get some balance here.
Oh, we'll let Laura decide whether you put the bad news into your report. I think you can wait and get the more details from the actuary, but we'll let Laura make that decision. Thank you. No, thank you, both Pete and Roland, for the detailed information. In terms of the BLS CPI, which I very frequently provide at this time, they actually update it tomorrow, so we'll have to wait and see how our inflation is doing this year, for this area. I think it had settled out a little bit in the area here last month. So we'll see. We'll see tomorrow, whatever the Bureau of Labor Statistics reports. Okay, so now our next topic under new business is the Retirement Board additional full-time employee. And we have the great form, which is put together by Miriam Cruiser and the HR committee. And do we have anyone to discuss this? No. Okay, well, we'll just discuss the form or whether we support this additional retirement coordinator. And this is as I read this, it's a retirement coordinator and moving from a part-time person to a full-time person. And according to this, because of the benefits and so forth and so on, the cost increases from the current amount by approximately $34,000. And I guess this is a net number because there would be a reduction in part-time equivalent costs. So are there any comments here, or anyone want to say anything? Leslie?
So I have not been able to attend the retirement board meetings to understand the justification, and the HR committee is meeting tomorrow, who has the closer purview over understanding the impact on the operations. Other note on this, so I'm not sure I have enough information to know the impact. Let me finish, and then Dan wants to chime in here. Clearly, I know we've often heard that part-time help is limited, and you run the risk of turnover with part-time employment of people wanting to seek full-time. And I don't know if that's the justification here. Clearly, seems like it's less expensive if you had to get 6 hours, to pay 6 hours of, or 15 hours of someone who's a second part-time person, and I don't know if that was considered. The form here typically asks the town administrator also to sign off on this. I know that the retirement doesn't report directly to them, but I think that that was intended for all staff changes because it really sets precedent for the rest of the staff. So there's some outstanding questions. I think the information that we have here, and I read the explanation, hard to get a sense of the pros and cons. So I'm left with questions more than I have answers, and people here may be able to answer. Pete's got his hand up, and Dan had his hand up.
Well,
Good.
I think Pete,
Yeah, it just, let me back up a little bit. This was vetted at the retiring board level. The vote was 4-0. The reason it wasn't 5-0 was because one person was absent. He later, at the next meeting, he supported the position. It would have been a 5-0 vote. The HR committee voted on this a couple months ago. It's been reviewed and approved by the town administrator. So it's gone through all the approval levels all the way up until the BET budget and the full BET. And before I get into any of the why we need it, I'll defer to Dan Azizmer. I know he wants to make a comment.
I'd rather just sort of keep to the process here. So if do you have further comments?
No, I wasn't sure if Ms. Moriarty started to mention the HR committee. I just wanted to tell everyone they're done with this issue. It's not going, it's been to the town administrator, it's been to the retirement board, it's been to the HR committee. This is the last step before the full BET.
So what you're saying is that the copy of the form here wasn't signed, the copy that was made for this board meeting wasn't signed by the town administrator, but he had already signed off on it, and therefore, this form just needs to be updated for that.
This form is a work in process. He reviewed this before this document was official.
Okay, but he signed off on the person, so he would be willing to sign off on the form when the form is kind of, make sure
Correct.
that it's completed. Okay.
Yes.
So next I'm going to go to Nisha.
Yeah, I just wanted to add a couple comments to address Leslie's questions. I did speak to the town administrator and the chair of the board of the retirement board to get their color and feedback on this specific issue and just understand the pros and cons of, from their perspective, what they thought about when they voted on this. So from the town administrator perspective, Ben Branyan, his real, and he kind of laid out exactly the concerns that we would have from a budget committee, additional costs, can we find other individuals within the department, but really the decision-making point for Ben was the audit portion of the role of this particular individual in terms of the nuances involved in actually going through some of the retirement information for some of these employees, the kind of detailed information that is requested that this employee function performs. He thought that was worth the in some sense, the incremental cost of this individual. The retirement board chair had a little bit of a different perspective, but really they voted, as Pete mentioned, 4-0 in their committee to approve this, and they thought this was really, in some sense, of a very cheap insurance policy in the sense that if, for some reason, that this individual was performing a function that, again, on the audit level, that if there were an issue at the town level, or if an employee or for their retirement benefits, either from a claim or et cetera, didn't get what they needed, then the individual would have paid for itself. And actually, the skill set required for this job, actuarial background, mathematical background, financial background, was also one that's hard to fill. So the existing employee that's a part-time would then looks like it's well respected. The individual that runs that department looks like it's well respected. So all the players involved really had in the conversations I had, looks like this has been properly vetted by the individuals in the department and the retirement board. So I would be supportive of this particular shift. And, I always ask a little bit more questions when we're adding to headcount, but this is one that appears to have gotten the appropriate due diligence and vetting by the appropriate individuals.
Okay, thank you. And Laura?
I just wanted to add, I was at the last retirement board meeting. They are fully in support of this change for the reasons that Nisha just outlined. They anticipate cost savings. The vote at the BETHR committee was 3-1.
Right.
Taken back in May, I think,
It was May.
May 4th. And the other, I just had a question, and Pete, I don't know if, just to get it out in the public, just to remind everyone, the funding for this doesn't come from the mill rate, it comes from the retirement board itself, the assets of the retirement board. So that's a nuance that perhaps we should consider. But I'm fully in support of this, and I think it's been vetted, it's gone through the process, it makes a lot of sense. Thanks.
So, I'm going to make some comments and then, let Dan speak. One of the things, this, as it's reported, comes from, we had a full-time person in 2011, and then, now this is being asked in fiscal '23 for a full-time person once again. And I did go back and I looked at, how many people did we have in the assessor's office in 2011, and it decreased now from 10 to 9, in the finance department from 16 to 14. In the human resources department was 17, 18, it increased, and now they also were lower in 17, 18, and 14, and they're back up to 15, so this is under the jurisdiction of the Human Resources Department. So that was one area that I looked at. Another was, actually, I spoke to Dan, and Dan did some good research as he had the data. And that was, how many persons do we have in the retirement fund right now? And so what is the activity comparing June of 2011 to, I guess the most recent data that he found was June of '21. And so both in terms of retirees, it has increased from 1,092 to 1,276. Inactive vested people declined by 23, from 171 to 148, and the active persons in the fund from 1,177 to 729, a decline of 448. So overall, from June 11th, 2,440 to June of 21, the most recent data, 2,153, a decline of 287 persons, so a decline of 12%. So I've looked at different data, staffing of departments, and we're all doing a lot more, actually, with a lot fewer people, speaking for the departments that report to the BET. I'm looking at the number of persons in management of the retirement fund, and then our process. And our process in the past has always been to kind of look at the budget guidelines and do headcount increases at the time we do our budget. So, if the point here is to be headcount neutral, I think that, and that's where we were, and that's what the first selectman presented for his budget, or actually approved by this body and the RTM. I guess, it's an interim, but, since it's under the same overall guidelines for fiscal '23, I would say that another point to Leslie's point of not necessarily being ready yet for the reason she stated, I would also say that my preference would be to continue to do changes in human resources staffing with the budget, so that'd be fiscal year '24. But I think another way would be for it to come in with headcount reduction to continue to do the spirit of our budget, which is head count neutral. So there's my comments. I don't know. Anyone has any comments? Dan, do you have comments?
Microphone.
So our chairman, Dan Ozismer.
Yeah, I'll be brief. I also serve on the HR committee, so that's where my comments are coming. First thing, I think Peter basically, went through the background, and that's mainly what I wanted to do. But, so that's all correct and good. There was a 3-1 vote at the HR committee. I was a no vote. I was a no vote for 2 reasons. One reason has been satisfied was that, when they came for the request, it did not have this, at that point, the formal support of the retirement board or the town administrator. So from a process point of view, those issues have been addressed, and, in the manner that Peter mentioned. The second objection I had was that, we're adding expenses, we're effectively adding headcount, we're adding a benefit package. So, and my view would be that if the town administrator or the first selectman wants to do this, there should be offsets otherwhere, in other areas. I would also add, it is true that this does come out of the retirement fund as opposed to directly out of the general funds, but ultimately, in the end, since this is a recurring cost, I would view this as, I don't see that as very different. In the end, it's going to be costs that are going to be borne by the taxpayers. But that was the reason for my no vote at that moment. I don't know, Miriam, if you have anything to add?
So now we have Miriam Cruiser also served on the HR committee, but as I mentioned earlier, who worked diligently on producing a great form for, a process for the future.
Thank you.
Current and future.
And I actually think the form probably tripped up the retirement board and their presentation to the budget committee today, because they did come before us months ago when this form was very new. So I think seeing that we had just established last month that these kind of requests would come to the budget committee with the form, I think is probably why you don't have any representation here from either of them, because we had already vetted it actually quite extensively at the HR committee. I think the only other thing, I obviously was a yes vote. I think the only other thing to add is that in a way that was very similar, I think, to an interim that we voted on in the town clerk's office, and particularly in this time where the type of personnel and the people that are sitting in the jobs is an important consideration and should be as we look at hiring in the town. I think this has a lot to do with the person who's actually sitting in this job and her capabilities. And I think she's pretty close to working at a full-time hour. She needs a couple more hours to be able, and as we know, to be able to contribute and to be a backup. I think a few years ago, when the retirement board administrator left, it left a very big hole in that department with a lot of people scrambling. And to Ms. Tarkington's point, the numbers of retirees are lower, but we're at an inflection point where there are going to be more retirements, and that's precisely the time where you need somebody who's very knowledgeable, doing the type of work that Daniela is doing, who is the person in question, because there are plenty of questions when they're trying to figure out if they're retiring. So I just wanted to add that color.
Thank you, Miriam. Do we have any other? Okay, Laura?
I'll make the motion to approve the reclassification of the part-time position to full-time on the retirement board.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Okay, so there's been a motion to approve the retirement board additional full-time employee made by Laura and seconded, Laura Erickson, and seconded by Nisha Arora. Those in favor? Laura Erickson, Leslie Moriarty, Nisha Arora, and those opposed. It's me, Leslie Tarkington. So that motion passes 3-1-0. Thank you. Thank you all. Okay, so Roland, I think you're back on the helping us out here. You're just going to run quickly through the CIP sheet on the Harbor Commission dredging that was presented and approved by this board unanimously last month as a routine item.
And part of the thing that we did as a result of that vote was we moved the project out of Parks and Recreation into external entities because it's not a Parks and Rec project. And it really isn't going to be managed by the town. If and when it happens, it's going to be actually managed by, I guess, the federal government. And we're just going to write a check. That's the extent of our involvement, as I understand it. And it'll be the Selectman's office that signs off on it.
The Selectman's Office, not the Harbor Commission.
No.
So rather than putting this with the Harbor Commission, it's now going to be external entities and in capital, external entities. Thank you. Okay. So. Certainly.
Just a clarifying question, on the CIP sheet, it says department, select department. I assume that means it should be external entities as,
That sheet was written many years ago, as I understand it.
I
the
thought it was
original sheet.
updated.
yeah, it says department, select department, and I just want to clarify that, is there a department that needs to be selected, or is it I mean, it says it's revised 6/16/2022, so.
So it was revised, and so Roland put this in external entities. So I guess just for putting it online purposes, if it ever gets online, does it get online? Or that was last month, we approved it, but I guess we just need to fix that.
And if you look at the open capital, you'll see it's in external entities.
Right, it is. I agree. Okay, so our next item is approval of BET Budget Committee meeting minutes for June 14th.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes.
So moved by Leslie Moriarty,
I'll second.
second by Nisha Arora. Those in favor? Oh, I'm sorry, Laura, apologize.
I just have a question on page 2, the GEMS, it says first installment
Well,
for
wait a second, I'm sorry.
GM2,
Page 2, what?
under GEMS, GM2. Release of conditions, it should be first installment for fiscal 22-23, I believe, instead of 21-22. Under the bar.
Yep.
And then similarly, under TAG, I believe it's the first installment of fiscal 22-23 on the next page.
Where was the second edit?
It says contribution to TAG, second installment. I think it's actually the first installment for 22-23, just for clarity.
So we'll make those corrections. Proposed by Laura. So with those corrections, are we okay?
Yes.
Those in favor?
Absolutely.
Those in favor?
Aye.
400. So those are approved, 400. So with that, so anything else? I think our next meeting is now scheduled for Tuesday, September 13th at 1 p.m., back to the more normal time. And in the meantime, we don't really get all of August off the way this implies. We just don't have a meeting, but we'll be thinking ahead to budget guidelines, right?
And it's just timing-wise, so we do plan the work. I think it's helpful for the department, especially given the challenge we're going to have for capital and fiscal '24 budget. If we can try and get guidelines, first read September, approval October. I know we haven't always been able to do that because of new information, but just to keep that schedule on our
We'll try our
timeline would be
best,
good.
right?
Yep.
We'll try our best. So, but we'll certainly be thinking about all these things. I think Roland has said that we should have the new capital numbers, fiscal year '23, blended in with fiscal '22 within about a week of July 20th, within that time frame. So everyone will get a new open capital at that point in time, and we can start, really start thinking about the future. So anyway, with that, I wish, no, I just wanted to wish everyone a happy summer first, Laura, and then I'll take your motion. So motion to adjourn by Laura,
Second.
second by Nisha. And those in favor? Aye, at 10:12. Thank you.